She didn't flinch when the station's perimeter alarm started screaming, effectively ending their wedding, before the vows were even exchanged. High Justicar Vespera simply drew a ceremonial vibro blade from beneath her bridal sash, her posture perfect, her expression bored. Sergeant Elias Thorne, on the other hand, was busy protecting the only thing that mattered. He ducked behind the altar, shielding a crumbled wrapper. "You realize," Vesper shouted over the claxons, her voice cutting through the panic of fleeing diplomats, "that this is a diplomatic bonding ceremony, not a bar brawl? Marriage was the mission. Survival was the unexpected honeymoon." Thorne yelled back, checking the readout on his wrist comp. "Also, you might want to put that toothpick away. Diplomacy fails when the enemy eats reality, or when that thing outside doesn't care about your fencing grades." Vesper looked down at him, her violet eyes narrowing. "You are an embarrassment to the United Systems. I'm the only reason you aren't currently being erased from existence," he muttered, popping the last piece of contraband chocolate into his mouth. She brought a sword to a space fight. He brought a snack. Classic. It turned out the day had started with significantly less shouting, though the disdain had been there from the moment Thorne docked. The Ethelgard spire was a masterpiece of crystalline architecture, a floating jewel where the elite of the galaxy gathered to discuss high philosophy and trade routes. Thorne's shuttle, the Rust Bucket, a name he felt was affectionate rather than descriptive, looked like a dumpster fire drifting through a jewelry store. But he maneuvered it into the docking bay with a series of alarming clanks, stepping onto the pristine white deck in a fatigues uniform that had seen 3 different war zones. The silence from the welcoming committee was loud. Waiting for him was Vespera. She was tall, even for an Ethel Guardian, encased in ceremonial armor that shimmered like oil on water. She looked at him the way one might look at a stain on a silk rug. "Sergeant Thorne," she said. It wasn't a greeting. It was an accusation. "Justisar," Thorne replied, offering a lopsided grin. He dug into his pocket and held out a foil-wrapped bar. "Peace offering, genuine synthetic cocoa, founded in a crater on Sigma 9. Vespera didn't move. "We are to be bound by the Synod to ensure military cooperation between your scrappy species and the High Guard. So I did not agree to be poisoned." "More for me," Thorne shrugged, pocketing the ration. "Look, I get it. You're royalty. I'm the grunt they sent because I'm the only one who knows how to calibrate a warp drive with a wrench. Let's just get the legalities over with so I can get back to the mess hall." She turned on her heel, her cape snapping with military precision. "Follow, and try not to touch anything. The spire is sensitive to crudity." The ceremony itself was held in the council amphitheater, a soaring dome of glass overlooking the local nebula. Hundreds of dignitaries watched in hushed judgment. Thorne stood at the altar, feeling the itch of his dress collar, while the officiant droned on about eternal cosmic harmony. Vespera stood rigid beside him, radiating a chill that had nothing to do with the station's life support. And then the lights flickered. Not a power surge, a distortion. For a second, the officiant's face stretched, looking like a reflection in a funhouse mirror, before snapping back. Thorne froze. He knew that flicker. "Get down," he whispered. "Excuse me?" Vespera hissed. "I said get down!" The alarms triggered a second later. The blast shield slammed over the viewports, turning the amphitheater into a red-lit cage. The dignitaries scrambled, overturning gravity chairs and trampling ceremonial robes. While Vespera stood her ground, blade in hand, Thorne was already moving. He didn't run for the exit. He ran for the wall terminal. "What are you doing?" Vespera demanded, deflecting a falling piece of debris with her gauntlet. "The safe room is that way." "Safe rooms are coffins if the hull goes," Thorne snapped. He ripped the panel off the wall, walking it, exposing the optical cabling. His fingers flew across the data pad he jacked into the port, bypassing the spire's sophisticated security with archaic, brutish override codes. On the screen, the external sensors showed nothing. Empty space. "Sensors are clear," Vespera stated, looming over him. "It is a malfunction." "It's not a malfunction. Look at the background radiation." Thorne pointed to a jagged line of static cutting through the data stream. "It's not reflecting light. It's swallowing it. That's a void echo." Vespera paused. The term meant nothing to her, and she hated things she didn't understand. "A what?" "A reality warping force Earth fought secretly 10 years ago," Thorne said, his voice dropping the humor. He pulled a cable loose, sparking a small fire that he patted out with his sleeve. "All right, now the Synod ignores it because they think we made it up to get more funding. Truth is, it doesn't show up on your fancy scanners because it doesn't exist in this dimension until it decides to eat you." The station shook violently, a deep, groaning metal sound that vibrated in their teeth. The gravity plating flickered. "We need a secure line," Thorne said, standing up and wiping grease on his pants. "Your quarters. Now." 10 minutes later, inside Vespera's pristine, minimalist quarters, the High Justiciar found her new husband hanging upside down from her gravity exercise bar, blood rushing to his head, eyes closed. "Is this a human ritual of surrender?" she asked, her hand still tight on her sword hilt. "It helps me think," Thorne mumbled. "Blood flow. Oxygen. Look, we have a problem. The Synod is debating in the assembly hall right now, probably drafting a sternly worded letter. But that thing out there isn't looking for territory. It's looking to rewrite the laws of physics for this sector. If we don't hit it with something that breaks the rules back, this station becomes a memory." Vespera stared at him. He looked ridiculous, disheveled, upside down, with a chocolate wrapper sticking out of his pocket. But his hands weren't shaking, and for the first time, the chaos in his eyes looked less like idiocy and more like a plan. "The Synod will not listen to a grunt," she said quietly. Thorne swung down, landing lightly on his feet. "No, but they might listen to a High Justicar who just brought a sword to a space fight." The Synod chamber was a cacophony of panicked alien dialects. Holographic maps of the outer colonies blinked out one by one. Not destroyed, just gone. I'd erased. "We must deploy the 7th Fleet to the perimeter," a tentacled counselor bellowed, slamming a limb onto the obsidian table. "A fleet!" Thorne's voice cut through the noise, amplified by the comms unit he'd stolen from a guard. He strode into the center of the room, Vesper flanking him like a glittering, lethal shadow. "You can't shoot a hole in nothing with a laser battery. You're trying to fight a ghost with a sledgehammer." The counselor bristled. "Who is this?" "Primate." "The Primate," Vesper announced, her voice icy and resonating with command authority, "is the only one here who isn't currently wetting themselves. We require the Ether Vanguard, the prototype." A murmur of outrage riffled through the assembly. The Vanguard was equipped with the experimental reality anchor, a weapon so unstable it was strictly theoretical. That is suicide," the counselor spat. "It turned out," Thorne said, checking the charge on his stolen pistol, "suicide is the only option left on the menu. We go now, or you can debate the finer points of surrender while your atoms get rearranged into soup." He didn't wait for a vote. He looked at Vespera. She nodded once. Order aligned with chaos. The launch was violent. The Vanguard screamed out of the dock, its engines protesting the sudden acceleration. Vespera's hands moved across the flight controls with fluid, terrifying precision, while Thorne strapped himself into the weapons harness, surrounded by wires he'd already begun to strip and reconfigure. "Target lock is..." Impossible, Vespera said, her composure cracking. The sensors are reading the target as yesterday. Ignore the sensors, Thorn grunted, in wrestling with a manual targeting yoke that hadn't been used since the ship was built. Look out the window. Ahead of them, the star field was wrong. Stars weren't just missing. The space where they should have been was folding in on itself, a geometric nightmare of angles that shouldn't exist. It hurt the eyes just to look at it. The Void Echo wasn't a ship. It was a wound in the universe, festering and spreading. Approaching event horizon, Vespera called out. Shields are... The ship lurched, not from an impact, but from a sudden shift in mass. The air inside the cockpit turned into liquid mercury, then back to air. The control console dissolved into butterflies, then snapped back to metal. It's rewriting us, Thorn yelled, his nose starting to bleed. Fire the anchor. I can't remember the sequence, Vespera whispered. Her hands hovered over the board, trembling. Her violet eyes were wide, vacant. Who are you? Why am I here? The Void Echo didn't just eat space, it ate context. It stripped the mind of the logic needed to fight it. Vespera, a creature of pure order and memory, was defenseless against a weapon that dismantled cause and effect. Thorn, however, had lived his entire life in a state of managed disaster. His mind was a clutter of bad decisions, improvised solutions, and stubbornness. Chaos was his baseline. Vespera, snap out of it, Thorn roared. He unbuckled, fighting the artificial gravity that was now pulling sideways, and lunged for the weapons console. The reality distortion hit him like a physical blow. He forgot his name. He forgot the war. But he remembered the feeling of adrenaline. And he remembered the itch in his fingers that meant fix it. Systems failing, the ship's computer droned, its voice slowing down, deepening into a demonic growl. Physics deprecated. Thorn slammed his fist into the manual override panel, shattering the glass casing. His hand found the heavy iron lever of the reality anchor. It was hot, vibrating with containment breach energy. Eat this, he gritted out and yanked the lever down. The Vanguard didn't fire a beam. It fired a truth. A pulse of absolute, immutable law slammed into the fracture. It was a wave of pure stabilization, forcing the chaotic geometry to obey the laws of physics again. The folding space screamed, a sound felt in the bone marrow rather than heard, and snapped flat. The Void Echo, unable to exist in a universe that made sense, and unraveled into harmless background radiation. The cockpit went dark. Silence returned, heavy and ringing. Thorn slumped against the console, gasping for air that tasted like ozone and copper. Sergeant? Vespera's voice was small, shaky. He gave a weak thumbs up. Still here, still ugly. Thorn woke up to the smell of antiseptic and the soft beep of a biomonitor. He was in the Spire's medical wing, or at least a very expensive version of it. He tried to sit up, but a firm, armored hand pushed him back down. Do not strain yourself, Vespera said. She was sitting by the bed, her armor polished, her helmet off. She looked tired, but the disdain was gone, replaced by a curiosity that unsettled him more than the judgment had. Did we win? Thorn croaked. The Synod has declared it a joint tactical victory, Vesper replied dryly. Hunt, they are currently drafting a treaty. Earth has been granted a seat of high military standing. Apparently, they decided they need someone who knows how to, what was the phrase, break the rules back? Thorn laughed, which turned into a cough. Told you. Vesper stood up, smoothing her sash. She looked at him, really looked at him, for a long moment. You fought with honor, Elias Thorn. The debt of my survival is bound to you. It is inconvenient. Don't worry about it. Thorn closed his eyes. Just don't make me attend another wedding. We are already married, she reminded him. Legally speaking, the ceremony concluded when we survived the honeymoon. Thorn groaned. Great. Divorce is going to be a nightmare. Vespera walked to the door, then paused. She didn't look back, but her posture softened, just a fraction. Enter that ration you offered me, she said, her voice neutral. The synthetic cocoa from the crater. Yeah? When we visit Earth, she said, I would like to try it. The original version, not the synthetic. Thorn smiled, drifting back toward sleep. It's a date, Justicar. She didn't correct him. She just walked out, leaving the door open.